Hello, everybody. I am Brigitte Stab, and I'm here today with Lisa Iversen of Bellingham, Washington. We are conducting an interview about her part in the family constellation's origin story. There's a group of volunteers who have embarked on a project to document the beginnings of family constellations in North America, because we feel it's important that everyone who helped establish this work gets a chance to speak, and everybody who is listening gets to know a little bit more about the history. So we have prepared a few questions, and I'm going to ask Lisa. She can just answer them one by one, or just tell her story. And when she's in the middle of it, I'm not going to be interrupting. So the first question is, when did you first learn about family constellations?
Well, it was 1998. And I was a therapist at that point. I was about 7 years into my practice in Seattle. My background with work, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'd had a therapy practice for about 7 years. And my then therapist, Jeannie Snyder, in Seattle area, she and her colleague, Sandy Zaboyan, they hosted a workshop with Heinz Stark, who I think is now deceased, but Heinz was one of that first generation of facilitators who learned from Hellinger. So Jeannie and Sandy hosted a workshop with Heinz Stark, and I am very happy to be doing this interview, and it'll be way more interesting if we talk, Brigitte. I think that was, and it's not just about me, that I think, wasn't that the first time that we met? Was that workshop?
That was the first time we met, yes. Yeah. As my first workshop on American soil as well. I invited Dietrich Weet to come, and he came a couple months later. But yeah, that's our beginning, and the beginning of your work, your involvement.
Which is why it's so great that we're having this conversation together. Yeah. So that was my first introduction to this work. Was Jeannie, my then therapist. She and Sandy hosted this workshop, and so I went to that workshop, and I, like many of us, most of us in this field, just was taken by it. For me, I had this very strong feeling in my body and my bones that it helped, the experience in the weekend helped me make sense out of what I had felt in my body for many years as a therapist. Mm-hmm. That when clients would walk into my office, that they walked in, with whole systems and missing of, and so I just was immediately taken with it, and I said to my good friend and colleague Kay Abramson, also a therapist, a very seasoned, gifted therapist, systemically trained, systemic thinker. I shared with Kay my experience, and so then I grabbed her, and then we went back to the next workshop, and then that began many years of Kay and I, and Jacqueline, another therapist friend, but primarily Kay and I traveled around and studied, learned with and from as many different facilitators as we could for many years, and this was what I call BCB for children. Mm-hmm. So I, at that point, didn't have kids, and so it was much easier to my own schedule, my own money, time, and resources. I could travel around, and my husband would then say it was like Baskin and Robbins ice cream. Who's the German of the month? And so Kay and I would travel around and just experience the work with as many different people as possible.
Right.
Hmm. I could keep talking if you want,
Well, that
unless
was
you
the
have
only
any
way back
questions.
then. You know, you had to
Yeah,
make that happen if you wanted to
that's
anything
right.
to do with this work. You had to go where the facilitators were, and they were kind of far and few between at that point in America, in the US. I can only speak for the US,
Yeah.
but yeah, we had to invest time and money to
Yes.
exposed. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I also had the feeling, you know, of course, with a lot of gratitude for that learning. Everything is learning for me. It's just like everything is learning. So that, you know, experience of learning and that first experience with Heinz, I also had this feeling of, oh, I want to see women facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
So, so Kay and I also kind of pretty intentionally went looking for the women and facilitators, because it just felt right to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, experience both women and men, you know, facilitating in that way. And so, so we then also, Kay and I, at first it was Kay and I, and then later I did so just myself. But we organized and hosted several European facilitators. We brought Gabrielle Borkan, who's also a German American woman. I don't know if she's still practicing or not, but she was living both California Bay Area and Germany, back and forth. So we brought Gabrielle to Seattle many times to do workshops, and at some point I moved to Bellingham, and then north of Seattle, and then I brought Snee Victoria Schnabel, also just so wonderful, to Bellingham, and Donovan Kampenhout. Don and I had met. He and I have different memories about where we met. I thought we met in California. I think he thought we met in New York. Wherever we met, I then at some point in Bellingham brought him to here to do several workshops. And I feel badly because I think I maybe hosted somebody else, but I can't remember who.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that many of those hostings were AC after children,
Mm-hmm.
after having our daughter. It was important to me to continue to learn and continue to experience the work, continue to be involved in the work. But as many of us know, you know, mothers with small children, it's hard to travel around.
Right.
And so, so hosting people here was a way to expand the work and the offering here in the States, but also made it possible for me to learn and to keep being in the field, etc.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So can you put into words why constellations are passion for you and
No,
remain so?
I can't put it into words very well. It's a very good question. I I mean, I will say that I guess one thing I could say about it is that I'm more humbled by it. I'm more in awe of it than ever. My sense of awe of it, of the modality, has grown, has expanded over time. It doesn't get smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It gets bigger. Um, and as and with that has also gotten bigger my sense of, most days when I am in good alignment, so has my humility. It's not 100% all the time. I can be as arrogant as all get out. But the work, the experience of the work provides that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would say that that actually is a pretty big carrot.
Mhm. It
The
is.
the opportunity that the modality provides as an invitation to humility.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I 100% agree.
yeah,
It's you just in awe when you're in touch with that larger field of consciousness,
yeah,
and it is humbling because it just,
yes,
wisdom that is contained is so far greater than any of us could ever hope to achieve on our own.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, the any experience that invites us to connect with our shared humanity, I favor.
Hmm.
And there aren't many in this part of the world. There are not many, and so um, it's not at least a common. It's not a common practice.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I always say to people who ask me, I say it's my spiritual practice. The
Hmm.
humility, the taking my ego and what I think I know completely out of it and
Yeah,
just following that greater intelligence. That is just an amazing time experience every
yeah,
single time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you already touched upon who your teachers were. Is there anyone among them that you favored or that you learned the most from?
Well, yeah. Thank you for asking that. I'll backtrack a bit and say um, how grateful I feel that my learning path was that it was what it was, that I had the good fortune to learn from and with so many people really
Mm-hmm.
provided for me a sense of clarity about the consistency of the phenomena
Yeah.
with the variation of the practitioner or the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So this for me has been a really steady point of learning with
Yeah.
this work, that um, the modality of the constellation work, even and with all of the adaptability of it, whether it's in group form or one-on-one work with object, all the different ways, it's very consistent, very reliable, sun and the moon kind of thing. But the way that the way that each practitioner approaches the field, but also the influence of each practitioner's own stewardship of their own field is really paramount with what also happens. And so I'm grateful to have been with Hellinger when he was alive. I mean, we're with him when he's dead too, but it was nice to be with him when he was um, working alive in his body teaching. And so I got to be with him many times, and my dog is pretty excited about that too. And and I would say that it made a big impact for me, the in terms of learning and teaching, the residential many days of residential work. So Kay and I, and my husband, with our 5-month-old daughter in tow, had the good fortune of going to the first international residential uh, teaching in Germany in 2001 of May, at Zist. Now it's Burn Reed, but the first event was at Zist, and that was with Hellinger. Hellinger was a teacher there, many other wonderful teachers. But those kind of immersions, to have 3, 5, 7, 10 days, I really, really appreciated.
Yeah.
A similar one many years later in Esalen, um, also with Hellinger, and Hines and Hunter Beaumont. Um, and so all those teachers and Gunther Weber and I would say that the Donovan Kempen's how spending time with Don for me, my experience of him, and I think this is for me how this went is it's a common way that teaching goes. Is it teaching and learning the mystery of it? That there can be an unlocking or an unleashing of a permission to know what you know.
Yes.
So for me, that was my experience. Just being with Donna, is it opened up for me a field inside of me of accessing a field that had always been there, but it unlocked it. So I'm forever grateful for that. And again, learning and teaching, like every opportunity in this work and in life is filled with learning. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah. It might be good to say for the listeners who don't know this, that there were no training programs. The best you could hope for was an immersion with the teacher, with the facilitator who would give us a few days of demonstration, and then maybe some extra time for explanations, but there were no like year-long programs or these kinds of things that people have today, that they can go to a teacher and then get certified and all of that. It's because back then there were none, not even in Germany. So the traveling around and learning from different people, I thought it was the best way to go about it. And I agree, Don was an amazing facilitator. The spiritual element in his work just blew me away. And I learned a lot too from that workshop that I went to in Bellingham and then again New York. So thank you for hosting him. That was my first exposure.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's true, like the predominant way there at that time was to learn. It was go to different workshops, etc. in the States. But there was this was also at the same time where actually in so this would have been the same era in 98, 99, 2000. In Eastern Washington, Colville, this was Fran. I mean, I got a call. It was my first, I think, I actually can't remember. I think it was Jane, probably was Jane in Portland who called me. And she and Fran were hosting SNE for, a training teaching program over in Eastern Washington. And at that time, and I was living in Seattle then, I think for me, I declined going to that because I was really enjoying and appreciating this ability to travel around and to work with so many different people. Sometimes I look back and I think, oh, maybe I should, it's easy to sometimes think a hindsight thing, but I trust everything, this sense of we make the choices we make, and that for me that was the path to go. But it was also the same time, and maybe this gets into another question about the development of the work in the States too. This was also when, I mean, I know that on the East Coast, New York area, DC, this whole area, there were year-long training programs developing there. The Hellinger, Susie Tucker, bringing birth there, etc. And is it okay if we go into that question a little bit in the
Sure.
U.S.? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, please.
So in late 90s, late 90s, on the East Coast, there was a Hellinger training program there. I also think Florida, actually, last night, in anticipation of our conversation, I was remembering, I want to say her name was Dwindy Keller. Do you remember that name?
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah.
In Florida, I think Heinz Stark really got around. German man. A lot of people around the U.S. Hosted him. So he was really quite an ambassador to this work, I think, in the States. Many people. Dietrich Veth, of course, I'm grateful to you for hosting Dietrich and Anatosh in Seattle so many years. Dietrich was a wonderful teacher.
He was also no longer with us.
Yes, no longer with us, yes. But there, in that era, there was a short period of time in the late 90s there where the work that was happening in Seattle and then the work that was happening in the East Coast and then Florida, maybe there was another region too. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure about the Southwest or not, but there was a time period there where, I know Ginny and Sandy were thinking that they were, I can't speak for them, but this is my memory. They were thinking, okay, we're going to be the hub. We're going to be like the people in Seattle who are going to be like in charge of organizing, that there would be this hub of, Seattle and New York or East Coast and southeast and of the U.S. and that all fell apart. Just out of humanness, that fell apart. So that did not happen. Not right or wrong or good or bad. Just that did not happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in those days, it wasn't easy to get groups together. It was really hard to find people who would be interested in exploring something that was completely new. So it was really these people, these dedicated people that had the passion to keep the work coming.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to learn. For me, it was very selfish. I wanted to learn. I wanted more of it. So, it was upon me to make that happen, and upon you to make that happen in Bellingham and Dr. Lonheim up in Colville, Washington, Eastern Washington, where I met Fran the first time. She was still a social worker at the time.
Yeah.
It was a really exciting time.
Yeah.
So when did you start facilitating?
With Kay by my side, Kay and I held hands together and started facilitating in 99, just like a year and a half after being introduced to this work. We held hands and we started practicing with other therapists. We invited, because it was important we felt like it was important to have a safety, a sense of, like a known kind of, we wanted to introduce the work to other people, but we wanted to do no harm. We had a sense of wanting to, we knew we were kind of dipping our toes in the water. So it's another thing I'm grateful for. Our learning path that Kay and I had it was like our own little private little study group. And Jacqueline, also for part of that time. I have to say this quote, Jacqueline, she's now a retired therapist, but the three of us worked in the same agency together. And one of Jacqueline's quotes, her experience of the Hellinger of constellation work, she said, it's like watching Dr. Zhivago over and over and over again. Anyway, it was a great, just crying and sobbing, at the end of every
Right.
movie. Anyway,
How ideal that you had these peers
oh, oh,
you could to practice.
oh, I'm so grateful. I mean, Kay and I also, because of our backgrounds, and we really trusted each other. So there was no need to like pretend like we knew more or didn't know or whatever. We could ask each other,
Right.
consult with each other, and then in facilitating, it was a in a group setting, we would go back and forth with, one person facilitating and then consulting with the other if we had a question, or whoever was witnessing could just say, hey, I have a, and just, I was really grateful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Kay continued to, integrate the work into her private practice, but decided to not continue with group work. And so when I moved to Bellingham, and then this is again after AC, our daughter I stayed at home with our daughter for a year, just nursing all day long. And then, and so then when I started my practice in Bellingham, that was 2001. And in hindsight, I just don't know how I did it, but I felt so strongly about the work still. I just I just told everybody about it. The work had been here. Hellinger had been here. Heinz Stark had been here in Bellingham in the mid 90s, including at the Lemmy Reservation here once. But I started offering I did it twice a month for a couple of years, and then I dropped to once a month. So from 2001, I just offered a monthly or twice monthly circle, and I did that until COVID. So for about 20 years, had an in-person once a month group where I just didn't know ever who was going to come. I held it as a really kind of a public service community offering.
Were those your Monday nights?
These are my Monday night, first Monday of the month, And I COVID started. I had this book project around whiteness that was about a year long. Writing, it's a time of flux for all of us. So I'm not quite sure going forward if I'll continue with it online or in person, to be revealed. But
right.
But it was one of my structures was a once a month circle here in town.
You mentioned your book. Would you please, for our listeners, say the title of it and what brought you to write it? I know you have passion for particular aspects of American history. So do you want to?
Thank you. The first book is called Ancestral Blueprints: Revealing Invisible Truths in America's Soul. The good news is it's a very different time now that we're living in than when I first wrote it. I think it was 2009 when that came out. I think that's right. And the work, the constellation work so clearly shows us the influence of all that's gone on before.
Right.
Hellinger's experience as a German man and the close-upness history of the war of World War II. For me, when I came into the constellation work, it just made sense to me. The influence of countries' history really matters.
Oh, yeah.
So I, as an American, just from the beginning with the war, I never thought it was separate. I didn't think it was unusual. It's that to have a sense of that history. It's challenging, though. I mean, our history is in the States. It's all all countries, all places have their challenges. But it is what it is. Our American history is what it is. And so so that first book was really about particularly the influence of our colonialism and slavery and immigration in U.S. history, the influence and intersection that history has with us as individuals and families. I couldn't not write it. I really tried for many years successfully to not write it, and then I gave up and I did it. And then this recent book was called "Whiteness is Not an Ancestor," and that is a collection of essays written by white women about the influence of these histories of whiteness in their own lineages. So white women speaking about whiteness. I was really honored to steward the writing process with a group of 12 women who I knew had a capacity to write about this. And so that came out in 2020.
That's exciting. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
So it's out, it's published?
Yes, that came out in the fall of 2020. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll look for it.
Thank you. And there's a really powerful video series as 2020 evolved as it did and it unfolded as it did. It was compelling to offer a conversation series with the SAS, and so those conversations are all recorded on the publisher website. They offer a way, they make it clear that it's possible. It's possible to do this. It's possible for white people to talk about whiteness. Radical. So
in this
more than ever.
Climate, yes.
Yeah.
I commend you for doing that project. That's very good. So have you trained students yourself, like formally, or how did you go about your teaching?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So the answer is yes and no. I have to say that the word training has never felt right to me in this work.
Right.
It is. It is. I understand it, of course, but it's really a left training is. I mean, I think of Scott Bader, who's a facilitator in the Bay Area, and he and I would joke about, training for what,
Right. To not know anything.
I mean, it's a lot of undoing, isn't it?
Yes.
So anyway, but how it was that I came to be in that role, a role of training or teaching, etc., was people kept showing up. It was kind of like the book, only people kept showing up asking me if I would offer such thing, and I kept saying no. And then there were enough people that it was like, okay, there was a group, and then and that has made sense to me that, well, the students show up and then the teacher does, not the other way around.
That's how it is for me too.
Yeah. So that's, and I don't remember when that started. I think, well, yeah. And by that point, I needed for me personally, in my personal life, our daughter to be a little older for me to have more time, because parenting, the matters of family life are substantive. And so my own role as a wife and a mom and a daughter and all those things was pretty, took a lot of time and energy and was my priority. So I think I started those groups 2012. Sounds about right. So so I began a year-long immersion program called Family Matters. And I was doing that every year till COVID. Yeah.
Yep. And what, if any, were the main points you wanted to get across to your students? What was important for you to teach, to add to the teaching pool that was out there in America already? what were you thinking to contribute that maybe was not there in other people's training? So, your personal, how did your passion flow into this, and what is it that you wanted to send people away with after spending that year with you?
Well, there are many things I could say. What I will say is back to the comment I made a bit ago about the personal field, the personal field of the facilitator has everything to do with what's going to happen in the group there.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the stewarding, of one's own everything, is paramount. And so
their own healing and their blind spots, and yes, a person has to really be aware of that so that that doesn't flow into the work and unconsciously steers it in a certain direction. It's very important. I would concur.
Yeah, and of course, the body is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but these, realities about how one tends to their own personal field, etc. We're never done.
No.
And so I guess a kind of a consciousness about that is important, to say the least. And I think that's all I could say right now about it. Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you would like to add to what you have told us? Anything you want the listeners to know?
Well, I want to say that, and I'm sure it's influenced partly from living geographically where I do. I live in Bellingham, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest, just 20 miles, south of the Canadian border, and I've had the good fortune to work in Canada quite a lot. And I want to honor Hillary Sullivan, who is a facilitator who also died many years ago, but she was also a close friend. And Hillary lived in Vancouver, British Columbia, and made an enormous contribution.
She did, yes.
In the development of this work in North America. Many people, I'm sure, haven't heard of her, don't know her, etc., which is why I'm mentioning her. Hillary did a lot to contribute to the development of this work in North America. I think the other thing I would say is, and it's probably part of a longer conversation, is I think that, for me as an American, every day, I'm blown away by how big this country is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and then you expand this country to, north and south. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of history.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot has happened on this continent. And I just would like to close by saying, yes, back to humility, that it's really an invitation. For me, I feel just every day, just as a person, a sense of awe at all that has happened on this land before me, before us, and now. And so it's all there. It's all there.
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess I wanted to close with that.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for talking to us. And thank you for all that you contributed to the field and to the development of this work. And having been there from the beginning and being my friend. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you. Thank you, Brigitte.
All right.